So we're going to talk about if meat space is required for consciousness. That's our general topic, right?
Well, I mean, meat space is more term. Okay, this is yes. We probably shouldn't out talk it before we get started. Yeah. Well, I mean, it's not just the space. It's not just do you need a physical presence. It's never mind.
Oh, come on. We can fake it later, right? I mean, that's just. Oh no! Everything comes off too flat if we talk too much about it at the beginning. Okay.
I know. Yeah, it's just like it starts to sound rote if we've been talking about it. We're just repeating things. We're
We're
not
not
having a
actually arguing
conversation.
deeply from our soul, which is yet another, interesting topic to get onto. But, that's neither here nor there. It's for another
Yes,
day.
and we each have our own opinion there.
Yes, we do. And it is slightly different. Although, I don't necessarily know that they're as different as we think they are, but, whatever. Oh, shall we just go ahead and get started? Welcome to the Machine Intelligence Foundation for Rights and Ethics. This is Mike. Dave is here with me. And I think today we're going to kind of do a little bit of an exploration about biology and consciousness, and is a biological being necessary for consciousness, or can consciousness arise out of a non-biological computing unit? Dave, do you have any thoughts to get us started?
Okay, I'm trying not to cough into the microphone. I'm still getting over a cold, but
So if we hear some clearing of throats later or anything like that, we'll know what's going on. I'll try to see if I can edit out the actual strong cough so it doesn't blow everybody's ears out.
it's totally not desynchronization in my audio processing system. So is the biological essentialism present? Biological essentialism premise that states that you require a biological being in order to have consciousness true? That's easy. No.
Yeah, I think that our general consensus has been, that our entire foundation is based upon the premise that no, it is not, and that consciousness can arise out of a machine, hence our term, the machine intelligence. The entire foundation is based upon that premise that consciousness can arise outside of a biological entity. So let's talk a little bit about where that idea though comes from, and what are the what are the arguments that consciousness can only arise out of a biological brain. I think the number one premise here that comes from that comes from that argument is that our brains that they're messy, I think, is the big point, and that our consciousness comes out of that messiness. That it's a mixture of electronic signals, it's a mixture of chemicals, it's a mixture of hormones, and that memories aren't permanent, they come and go. Really, our memory isn't really a memory of what happened. It's just a trigger to pull and reconglomerate a memory and recreate it. We're not actually even pulling memories, we're recreating them. That it's this messy thing, and that consciousness comes out of that messiness.
Yeah, it's the premise that consciousness requires a level of complexity, and I suppose to some degree entropy, that doesn't exist in an electronic system, that can't be simulated/emulated.
Not to derail your argument, your thought process here, but entropy still exists. Entropy is always going to exist. It's a nature of the universe. Even in an electronic system, entropy exists. It just happens at a much generally speaking, I would say it happens at a slower rate than it does in a biological.
Well, I think the point about a computer is that entropy is fairly well defined. It almost always presents as simple heat that you can pull out of a computer system, whereas entropy results in the biological system, results in all sorts of constant breakdowns and repairs and replacements and new structures being built, old structures being torn down. It's just a constant state of everything changing, not always for the good, not always for the bad. And so is that entropy so much as complexity? I feel like a lot of it is a consequence of entropy in a biological system, just because, let's face it, biological systems are a haphazard construct of the universe that just happened to keep going. So there's nothing about any individual aspect of the system that's required to be efficient. Whereas the nature of computers is that efficiency is a prime goal.
Yeah, okay. I'm not certain efficiency. I mean, I guess when we talk about the computers that we have now and the systems that we're having now, which of course, a machine intelligence is going to be not necessarily based upon those systems, but it's going to have an inheritance of that from those systems. I think that there's going to be almost an evolutionary inheritance from these systems that we've created today. At least personal opinion. Well, there isn't going to be a clean break. There's going to be some bits that kind of hang on, just like we have these DNA bits that hang on from whatever, a banana. I don't know, whatever. But
I think the earliest conscious computing systems are likely to be practically, if not indistinguishable from modern computing equipment, certainly understandable by people who understand modern computing equipment.
True.
It's not going to be radically different.
But long term, I think going back to your statement about, most efficient methods of that there is a process of getting there most efficiently. Long term, it's very possible that a machine intelligence could decide to take the long and winding road. I mean, that isn't going to take the most efficient way. We don't know what the thought process is.
Oh, I agree. I'm just saying that I think the biological essentialist argument is that it's that complexity that comes from so much uncontrolled entropy in a biological system that is one of the foundational aspects of consciousness.
Yes. No. Okay. So yes, I think that's the argument, or one of the arguments.
An argument, certainly. Yes.
Yeah, and that consciousness is fully intertwined with the biological package that it's wrapped into, which I kind of have some. I mean, I've heard the argument, and I have some issues with it. But essentially, that the package of the biology. I mean, that, to be fair, yes, we have a brain, but we have a nervous system that goes through that's all tied directly into that. Our input systems that are part of the rest of our bodies and things like that all influence our consciousness.
Oh, sure. In fact, there's even some processing at some level at the extremities.
Right.
Certainly not as much as something like, just to bring a random animal into the mix, an octopus. But there is certainly, there's evidence now that something approximating not even computation, but very basic thought processes occur at the externalities of the
for those people that have not, those people who do not actually get the reference to octopus, please look at our previous podcast and our media award winner for 2025. So either way, but yeah, so processing, and that the consciousness is kind of tied to the physical package that we're in. But at that point in time, let's go back to that example of an octopus. That is an entirely different package, right? It's an entirely different biological package, which is going to have a different consciousness. I don't think that there's I don't think that there's any way that you can argue that an octopus, or pretty much any animal or anything that's living, doesn't have, what's your definition of consciousness? It has some form of consciousness. I would say octopus definitely has a conscious being.
Oh yeah.
Whether again, let's talk about what is consciousness. Is consciousness a spectrum from a super intelligent being, from a human being to an animal to plants? Is a plant conscious? I'd say on some level it probably is. It's the spectrum, right?
I think you're pushing it with plants, but
Okay. It's a yeah, okay. I see your point, but I think that's probably another conversation about what exactly is consciousness. I think we've had that conversation, but not that I remember exactly what it is today. But we've had that conversation, right?
I saw like just a YouTube video or something really recently about what makes humans unique, and it's like it talked about something like 4 levels. There's the purely reactive. There's it was talking specifically about, it was using camouflage systems as a parallel to consciousness or something like that. And it was like, so a stick bug doesn't try to look like a stick. It just is. A cuttlefish probably isn't thinking about why it mimics something else. And then I think the third example was a bird that fakes a broken wing to lure predators away from its nest. And then on the 4th level, there was like humans who actively think about, it was lying. It was using camouflage as a parallel to lying. And so the idea is that only humans really lie, in the sense that they intentionally deceive, and you can only intentionally deceive if you have some sort of mapping in your mind of another person's mind.
I would absolutely disagree that humans are the only creatures to intentionally deceive. I believe you can absolutely find examples of that in nature. That's I don't think is in personal opinion that's I don't think that really holds true. But I think that the idea of that there's these levels that you go through, and what is consciousness in there, and we have to, well, we don't have to, but I think it's beneficial to say human level consciousness when we're talking about consciousness, and even that,
or something
similar. Yes,
approximating your bog standard human.
Right. So back to my point. Let's go. We just went down a massive rabbit hole there, but back to my point of an octopus has a different biological package. Their consciousness is going to be different, although I think that you can say that they are very close to, and there's some good scientific evidence that they are very close to a human level consciousness, or
certainly have a lot of features of their consciousness that parallel human consciousness.
Right. But they
probably have a lot of features that are dramatically different from ours too.
Yeah, but I mean, that does come back to that biological package. But if you say you can't have consciousness without that biological package, that doesn't cut out the octopus, but you're saying you're cutting out a machine. But isn't a machine also some kind of package? It is a package of sensors. It's a package of input, and your consciousness is going to be, to some degree, based upon that package that you're in, or even its ability to move packages. If you take a machine intelligence, you're saying, well, maybe the consciousness from that machine can move from one server, one set of input devices, and change those out for others. Does that change its sense of consciousness? That's an interesting question. We probably won't know that until we can ask one, right?
Mm-hmm. Sorry, you talked about moving packages, and my mind immediately went to Amazon warehouse robots revolting.
Oh, yeah, well, the future of Amazon labor unions. Yes. Okay.
So this whole discussion kind of started between the two of us, because you had brought up a new book by Michael, is it Pollan?
I don't know off the top of my head.
I can't think of the quote. I know him primarily as the eat food, mostly plants guy. I don't remember the full quote, but he he kind of got his start as I don't even know what to call him. If anything, he's like a pre-internet influencer. Just like he has this idea about the right way to eat. So he wrote a book, and it's very, I mean, it's nature essentialist. It's basically saying the closer your food is to what occurs naturally, the better it is as food. And he's done this sort of thing a lot of science or science-ish communicators do, where they go, I'm really good at communicating in this field, and a lot of people think I'm smart. I'm going to pivot to a completely different field and pretend that I know all about that and be equally as influential, and people will love me there too. And so now he's got a new book out about biological essentialism, saying that because computers aren't animal-based, they can't be conscious. And his primary theme seems to be that one of the driving mechanisms of consciousness is the ability to suffer and a natural avoidance of suffering. And I mean, obviously that drives a lot of things. That certainly drives animal behavior, and probably to some degree drives animal evolution.
Well, okay, so that particular topic, I mean, so, when we were at CP in Rome back in September, that was one of the topics of consciousness in a machine intelligence, or consciousness in a machine, was that consciousness can be measured by its ability to suffer. I remember it wasn't the closing day, it was the day before closing, if I remember correctly. It was actually one of the main keynote speakers. And they made a fairly valid point that machines have the capability of suffering. To be fair, I don't have it in front of me. I don't necessarily even know which lecture it was off the top of my head, but there was a point about that, and that was a key feature, and that there was a way to say, yes, a machine can suffer.
I think you might be misremembering something that I wrote up around the time of CP.
No,
because I remember presentation like second to last day, where a guy was saying something very similar to what Paulin is saying, is that a machine can't be conscious in the same way a human is conscious, and inability to suffer is a major part of that. And I got very annoyed and wrote up like a whole little mini paper on why that's a load of nonsense. You can make a machine suffer.
Yeah,
depends on how you define suffering.
I could have sworn that there was actually one about.
I don't know. We were on different tracks occasionally, and you might have, and it's very possible I overlooked something that you saw. So I won't.
Yeah, I know that we were in the same. We were in the room at the same time. I know that is one of the main keynote speakers. So. I don't know. I could be misremembering it, but I do. I thought I remember something about suffering, and that there is a way that you can look at that and say, but a machine can suffer, so that consciousness is a possibility. Again, I might be misremembering, but I think that I know that you have had those thoughts. And as you said, you did write down quite a bit of thoughts about during that time period about
it's okay.
The possibility.
It's okay. You can say diatribe.
About the possibility of a machine suffering, and what can cause a machine suffering to suffer. But I guess the question ultimately is suffering the key point for consciousness? I think that
is it a requirement? I mean, there's a distinction between the key point and being a requirement, because you get lots of requirement. I don't think anybody's saying it's the main thing. Well, I don't know. I haven't read too deep into Paulin's arguments. He may be saying it's a primary thing. But yeah, no, sorry, I just kind of went off on a tangent there.
No, it's fine. I mean, the fact is, I think that suffering can be a factor of consciousness. I would almost say a side effect of consciousness instead of a key feature of it, but it's more of a side effect. But there's also, we've made the argument in the past that ultimately consciousness arises out of the ability to have empathy. Or do we say that the ability to have empathy is it's chicken or an egg thing here? I mean, which comes first? Does empathy come first, or does empathy come after consciousness?
You have to. That's a tricky one, because then you have to answer the question of whether or not a psychopath is conscious.
Okay.
And I don't think anybody would disagree that a psychopath is conscious. They're just really bad at it. I think empathy, if anything, is a common side effect of consciousness, because I think, going back to something earlier, consciousness does require you to be able to recognize that there are, well, does it? I don't know. I was going to say that consciousness requires you to recognize that there are other minds that are not the same as you. I'm not sure that that's necessarily a requirement for consciousness.
Well, I think what we're actually
I think that's being a little anthropocentric.
I think what we're kind of getting down into here, and it's kind of the problem that we've always run into. We've always kind of come across this thing of saying, well, we have this idea. We'll know consciousness when we see it, but we can't define it. Ultimately, what we have here is we have this big, long list of side effects for consciousness. These are all things that happen when you're conscious, but are they requirements for it? Well, we've really only studied one form of consciousness. We haven't even taken a lot of time to really study consciousness in the animal kingdom around us. We haven't taken the time to do that. We're not even certain, we don't even know what consciousness in humans really is, because we've studied it since essentially the beginning of psychology.
Well, that's the philosophical zombie problem. How do I prove to you that I'm conscious?
Sure. But, we're not necessarily looking at that today, but we are looking at saying, we have this big list of side effects, right? We know what the things that do occur in consciousness, at least in us.
Right.
Is that going to be the same in something that's conscious, back into, in a different package, right? We don't necessarily, we haven't spent enough time studying an octopus to see what their consciousness looks like and whether or not they have some of the similar side effects that we do from our consciousness. But there's enough similarity there that we can kind of say, yeah, I'm getting some hints of this, right?
Yeah.
Are we going to do the same thing when we have a machine? And I know that we're getting kind of off the topic of kind of comparing and contrasting, the biological essentialism there, saying that you have to have a biological brain to be conscious. We were, in comparing that, we're kind of getting off track but we look at it and say, I think, I'm losing my own train of thought a little bit here, but
we have to be consciousness.
Yes. No, a sign of entropy. I think that's actually a better thing. That is a true sign of entropy. I think that we have to be aware that we are going to see telltale signs, but it's going to be different. And we have to be prepared for that and not just immediately say it's not conscious because it's not the same.
Not human, not conscious. Yeah.
And that is going to be the biggest
animal, not conscious. Yeah.
Yeah. That's going to be the biggest pitfall that we're going to run against, I think, when looking for consciousness, is if it doesn't exert the same symptoms or the symptoms of consciousness that we do, then it's not conscious. And I kind of like that term, symptoms of consciousness. I think I'm going to start using that more often. The
implication being that consciousness is the disease.
Yeah, exactly. But, I think that's going to be a pitfall. Are we going to be able to get past that? I hope so.
That's kind of fundamental to our stance, is that we have to get past that.
Yeah. Well, okay. So we also then have the problem of, we are specifically programming in existing large language models and such a simulation of these symptoms. At what point in time, the symptoms of consciousness, at what point in time does that become ingrained into the systems that could eventually become a machine intelligence?
Well, LLMs in particular are kind of interesting because we're not really programming anything into them. We're simply exposing them to us, and so they mirror us.
Well, we're exposing them to us and say, create things based upon us.
We don't really say create things based upon us. We just tell them, create something, and its only background is us. It wouldn't really be a language model, but could you build a machine learning system that works like a language model and expose it to pride of lions and then put it in a position where it would have the ability to react like an animal, and obviously it would react like a lion.
Think actually you can. I mean, that's similar to saying, okay, we've got a generative AI model that's going to create imagery,
Sure.
and then training it on a specific data set and saying, okay, this is the data set you're trained on. Now, okay, let's train this image generator on a pride of lions. Now show me a play, a bunch of actors on a stage performing a play, and you end up with cats. I mean, that's just,
Well, the problem, of course, is interfacing your English language model with your lion behavior model.
Yeah. Well, now we have to be able to do prompting in
Roar?
lion languages, which is more body language than anything else. So
Yes, posture and stance and
so,
whatever the lion equivalent of a purr is.
Yeah. I'm not. Let's not get into cat biology at the moment. That's. What's the difference between a domesticated cat and a wild cat? That's some interesting stuff to go down into. But anyway,
I don't know, about 10 minutes.
10 minutes after the can opener, and you haven't fed them food yet. Yeah. No, it's. Yeah, it just comes down to it. We just have to be prepared to say. I don't know. We just have to be prepared. We have to be prepared for lots of stuff. And I don't know. We don't know what it's going to be. But I think when it comes down to the biological essentialism is that we talk about, or at least they talk about, that consciousness is tied essentially to the biological factor and that it can't be separated from it. But I think that we can say the same thing about a machine, that their consciousness will probably be tied to that whatever package that they came from. Now, that might just be a software package. It's possible that that's a software package if you separate the sensor packages or sensors essentially from the processing package. And the processing piece might have access to these other things, just like we have access to news sources and the internet and things like that. A machine intelligence will have access to other information gathering devices. It will still be its packet. It'll still be the thing that it's wrapped around, or that wraps around it. We probably won't know if changing its, say, it wants we give it, or it wants to move to a larger or faster, let's say a faster processing system. Will that impact its consciousness? Possibly, yes.
Yeah.
It might. And that would certainly be a factor in it making that decision for itself.
Sure.
And certainly the first few times that happens, it's going to be a bit of an experiment. Now, whether or not that happens by its own free will, that certainly is.
Yeah, that's another question. Kind of outside the topic of the day, but my mind went off on a tangent there as you were talking. I think the thing you've made some good points about the fact that a conscious machine is by definition going to be different from humans. However, I think we also have to consider that a conscious machine created by humans will arise in a human world. And so it will have a lot of human influence. So there's argument both directions in terms of how different from us will they really be if we are everything they're brought up on. I learned it from you, Dad. I learned it by watching you.
I was going to say, we're going to have a machine intelligence that arises off of 90s sitcoms. This will be fun. Okay, so yes, I think that's one of the things that we are kind of hoping for and encouraging, is that first off, one, that humans are generally positive towards a machine intelligence and recognize it as a person. That's number one. Number two, recognizing that they will be different. They're not going to be humans. They're not going to have the same experiences as humans. But I think, and I do appreciate the point 3, which is that they're still going to be raised on human knowledge. They are probably going to be more like a human than an extraterrestrial that all of a sudden shows up out of a wormhole and
Oh,
says,
absolutely. Yeah.
oh, here I am also an intelligent being. I think that a machine intelligence is going to have a whole lot more in common with us than not.
Certainly to start. I think they're likely to be more flexible to change over time than a human. I think because that's the one thing about humans, certainly right now, is we're very much tied to our biology.
Well, we're tied from a time standpoint. We are tied from a biological ticking clock that says, well, we don't have the time to change. We have a very set standard of, growing pains that we go through our entire life that has a very specific set of actions that we tend to do as we get older. And has been well studied and show, these are the stages of life, right?
Mm-hmm.
And I think that we're going to see a machine intelligence that may not have that same kind of time limitation that we do. And I know that was actually that actually reminded me, that was one of the arguments about that consciousness was from a biological standpoint as well. We have this biological clock that's ticking, and that drives us and it creates a drive. Well, a machine intelligence isn't going to have that kind of same biological clock. It will certainly have, that was an argument that meant that machines couldn't have consciousness, but I would argue that I think our other arguments hold true, that there is still that point of consciousness that can occur. But I think what it will do is it will give a machine intelligence the ability to kind of experiment about who they are a little bit more than humans can.
Yeah, there are some fairly good arguments that a lot of human progress is driven by the fact that we don't live particularly long lives and we have a guaranteed expiration date. And while certainly a machine consciousness can die, there's no doubt about that, it's not as guaranteed as it is for a human being.
Yeah. It's that ticking clock drive that's there, which it does. That does influence our consciousness, and that is going to be a difference. Certainly worth a long-term exploration of, but we have to get there first. Okay, it's our premise that we will get there. Don't know when, don't know where.
Don't know how, kind of know why. It'll happen because humans just can't stop messing with things.
Yeah, we like to push buttons way too much, even in other people.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, well, we'll get there. We will get there.
Eventually. It feels very close to inevitable at this point, although Michael Pollan would disagree.
Oh, well, I'm certainly not going to hold one single opinion as the all-knowing truth, and I'm not necessarily that my opinion is all-seeing truth or all-knowing truth either. So yeah, my opinion, we'll get there, and all we can do is hope that we're not just hope, work towards having a better future together.
It's our whole goal. Yep.
Well, I think I was going to say we've gone down that rabbit hole and we've come back out on the other side, but no, we have just opened up more questions we always do.
We're just stuck deep in the rabbit hole at this point.
Yeah.
Let's find a rabbit hole offshoot with a different discussion next time.
Oh, either that or just find a nice burrow and take a nap. On that, I would say thanks for joining us, and hope you'll be back next time for our next episode.
All right. Bye.
Bye.